Hello, Dexter fandom. This morning was like Christmas morning all over again for me as I watched episode 4 of Dexter Original Sin, and the episode delivered on so many levels. I was getting teary eyed and I was smiling and I bursted in laughter at the end of the episode. This episode really delivered every single aspect that we have grown to know and love of the Dexter Original show. There was the silly humor, the dark humor, the storyline, the plot, the characters were there. Everything just worked so well together. Everything came together so well during this episode. And I am feeling really optimistic and really excited about what's in store for us with the remainder of the season. Let me start with my appreciation for Patrick Gibson. You cannot convince me that this person in the show isn't young Dexter, isn't the young Michael C. Hall. I am full on with the delusion. I think my brain is fully on board with the illusion that this is the same person, the same character. Patrick Gibson's mannerisms, gesturing, posture, every single thing that the actor does in portrayal of Dexter is spot on. I am mind blown. My brain has been tricked. And I think the voiceover really helps kind of get me into the illusion that it's the same person. So hearing the voice of Michael C. Hall and seeing the portrayal of the character by Patrick Gibson be so spot on, down to the even posture of Dexter being slouched over just ever so slightly in some scenes, especially when the character is standing over a body. The stance is the same, the posture is the same, the facial expressions are the same. You cannot convince me it's a different person. It the actor kind of looks like Michael C. Hall, and like a younger maybe version of Michael C. Hall, and the mannerisms down to the T are exactly the same. That my brain is fully on board. I mean, look at this. I love this scene for so many reasons, but mostly that this is the same socially awkward, almost comical Dexter that we know from the original show. He's completely oblivious to the fact that he's holding two melons to his chest. And this scene, of course, LaGuardia and Dexter both are spot on. Look at the body gesturing, the posture, the facial expression. Everything about this scene, his examination of the body, is just perfectly spot on. So, huge shout out to Patrick Gibson for having me fooled. I am fully on board, fully in belief. Santa's real, Dexter's real, Patrick Gibson, Michael C. Hall are the same person. The character is the same. I'm still struggling with Deb, still struggling with Harry, mostly struggling with Deb though, because I think mainly for me, when I watched the original Dexter show, I think I was in my 20s watching the show, and Deb, the character of Deb, was around the same age. So for me, it was easier to relate to that character that is around my age. It was easier to get into her psyche. It was easier to kind of relate to her in a sense. But I'm having a harder time, much harder time relating to a teenager being 35 years old myself. So I think that's where the bigger disconnect is that I'm having a really hard time relating to the character of Deb, where I really fell into the character right away, right off the bat, with the older version of Deb. Potentially because we were similar in age as I was watching the show, and the character was a lot easier to relate to. Whereas now it's a little bit more difficult for me to relate to the Deb that's going through the turmoils that she's experiencing right now. Although those are turmoils that are familiar to me, that, the feeling, kind of the feeling of the outsider in your family system. And she's really, we see here that she's really up in the ante of her behaviors, and in a sense the self-destructive quote unquote behaviors, as a way of as a way of grieving, because now we learn in episode 4 that Doris hasn't even died that long ago. It was only a year. She's only been gone a year. So Deb is still fresh in the grieving process of her mother. And not only is she still kind of trying to process and kind of wrap her mind around the idea of losing her mom, but she's also feeling completely isolated from her dad and brother. And she does a great job as a teenager. Really props to the writers. She does a really good job communicating that and anger and, saying out loud to her dad multiple times. We see throughout the episodes that she is feeling alone and isolated. And we see Harry kind of try. And as a therapist, I'm really, really excited in the authenticity and how genuine the 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 characters feel, because I think the writing is really, really good here. We see how Harry is kind of trying to relate to Deb, and is trying to understand the emotions in a sense, but is really botching it in very stereotypical dad way. So one of the scenes where in episode 4 we see that Deb comes home and she's expressing how angry she is that she's feeling pushed to the side within her family system, and she is again expressing her feelings and needs, and we see that Harry is in shambles. He doesn't really know what to say or what to do again. I really, really like the scene between Deb and Harry because it shows us a really authentic, real type of confrontation between a Deb that's really hurting, that's trying to express that she feels on the outskirts of her family, and Harry is completely clueless in typical dad fashion. And we see that he is kind of trying to relate to her in a sense, or trying to emote with her or understand, and he's apologetic and he's trying to connect to her in some way, but again his attempts go awry when he snaps into dad cop mode and notices the dilation in her pupils and that her eyes are not looking right, and calls that out right away and snaps into investigative mode, as opposed to continue to be in the emotions and continue to hold space for her suffering, which is, I think, really, really excellent writing here. So we see Deb up in the ante with her behavior and engaging in riskier and riskier behavior as she continues to disconnect from her family, and just as she continues to feel on the outside of the family, which is also pretty typical teenage behavior. So I really like this scene between Harry and Deb. Really a great way of showing us this disconnect, and how Harry is in a sense trying, but at the same time compounding on the isolation and loneliness and disconnect that Deb is feeling from her family system. And then we notice and we see how that failure sinks in for Harry, and he continues on with more reckless behavior, in a sense, the sense of hopelessness or helplessness of, ugh, there's nothing I can do about Deb. Maybe I can do something for Dexter, but at the same time, he continues on with a reckless, desperate approach to support Dexter. And we see a parallel here, that his approach toward Deb is desperate in a sense of, I'm trying to help you, but I don't know how to. And the way I go about it is incorrect or is harmful. And the same way is happening for Dexter too, for Harry's relationship with Dexter, where he's trying to help, but he's doing it in a harmful way as well. We see him here kind of desperately just give him the green light to go after a hitman. And we also see from the Dexter perspective that the bloodthirst is getting to his brain, where he is also becoming more and more reckless of, he really just needs another kill, another taste, that he's not thinking through who he's going after, that there's no fear here whatsoever. It's the ultimate kind of like a tunnel vision type of approach of, this is all I need, and there's no thought process whatsoever as to the quality or the type of the person he's going after, and now he's stalking and trying to murder a very skilled hitman that's been doing it for such a long time and getting away with it. So I'm gonna nerd out here for a moment because when I teach couples and family therapy, I love talking about the Berenian theory that anxiety, frustration, stress can travel throughout the family system. So when we have here the three Morgans are experiencing very similar levels of frustration, they all have a need, a very human need that's being unmet by their direct environment that they're looking to meet elsewhere through their own self-destructive behaviors. We have Deb that's really seeking this inherent need for connection with her dad and her brother and isn't getting it within the family system, so she's acting out externally and internally. And we have Harry that has this very strong need to protect his kids and is going about it the wrong way. And then we also have Dexter, who has a very strong need to fill a void inside him, and he's going about it the wrong way. So all three of them are experiencing very similar levels of desperation, of frustration, of unmet desires, and all three of them are going about it in a very self-destructive, outwardly destructive way as well. The other aspect of this episode that I really liked was the backstory that we were getting about Harry and his attachment toward Dexter. So we see Harry babysitting for Dexter and Brian, and him losing sight of Dexter for a little bit, and him in the moment of the rush of adrenaline of thinking that he lost Dexter and that something really, really bad and terrible happened to him, has a flashback about his failure to save his son, and then he finds Dexter, and in a sense that's kind of the closure that he needed to happen with his own son is now happening with his Dexter, where he was able to find him and protect him and save him. So we see here this transference in a sense, or the projection of the unmet paternal need to protect and save that's happening toward Dexter here. And we get a bit of a backstory as to why Harry is so attached and so protective of Dexter and never gives up on him. We also get a bit of a backstory of why Harry was hesitant to adopt Brian, and we see Brian playing with lizards and cutting their tails off. Honestly, I don't think that this is very alarming child behavior. I think it's pretty natural for kids to play with reptiles or with very small, tiny animals, and they may inflict pain on them once in a while, and they may experiment with them. I don't think there's anything really pathological there. That is a huge red flag. I think a lot of kids play and cut off lizards' tails when they're kids and don't grow up, or roughhouse with animals and don't grow up to be serial killers. However, this kind of adds to the backstory of why Harry was hesitant and apprehensive toward Brian, especially knowing that both Dexter and Brian grew up in a very unstable environment with both of their parents doing drugs and dealing in drugs and all of that, that there's going to be a tendency towards violent behavior or pathological behavior in a sense. So I really like the backstory that we get here for the strong attachment that Harry has toward Dexter, and the hesitancy and the detachment that gets created early on, even before the shipping container incident. Even before then, we see that Harry was already detached from Brian. The storyline between him and Laura, again, we're not getting a lot of information there. We already know that. There's no chemistry between the actors, between the two characters. The makeout scene and when they end up kind of insinuating that they ended up having sex, I didn't feel the chemistry. And it didn't feel like the build up to it was appropriate. It kind of felt a little bit rushed. They the chemistry wasn't quite there yet. I mean, she was his informant for some time, and there's this thrill and excitement that she's, you know, coming coming back home unharmed, and all of that. You can get caught up in that. The chemistry is not quite there. I don't think we earned it yet. I don't think the characters earned it yet to have that makeout session. The last thing I want to say about the episode is we didn't get a lot of information, or we didn't get any information at all about the who kidnapped the child and cut out his finger and now murdered the child. So this is gonna continue to be in the background. I think it's likely that this is going to be kind of like the big bad of the season. There's going to be some plot twist by the end that's going to turn out to be someone right under our noses or something of the sort. I like to continue on with my theory that I presented in my previous video. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. I like to continue on with the same theory that maybe this is Brian Moser, who is, you know, sending little hints to his brother and seeing if he can remember or having flashbacks about his childhood, since we potentially saw Brian Moser make contact with his brother in the previous episode. So I'd like to think that this is going to be a case that remains unsolved at the end of the season, because it's Brian Moser and he doesn't get caught and he just has to, you know, skip town and go somewhere else. Maybe the cops get close to finding him, but he skips town and changes his identity and all of that. That would be really cool. That'd be really cool if they did that. That, you know, we know it's Brian, or we find out it's Brian at some point, and we find out that it was one of his attempts to touch base with his brother, and the cops get really close to catching him, and he has to skip town, change his identity and start all over, and then, you know, wait some time before he tries to make contact with his brother again. I think that would be really, really cool if that was the plot of the season, or the, you know, the main villain story of the season. But it is more likely that it's not. Potentially it's another kind of big bad of the season that we're going to kind of learn about later, and maybe it's going to be a plot twist of maybe it's Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, or you know, the captain, or something of the sort. Overall, it was an excellent episode. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. I'm really excited for the remainder of the season. I almost don't want the season to end, but it came at a perfect time for me, as I am packing up to move to a new home, and there's so much going on in the background, and the winter can get a little long over here. So this is giving me something to look forward to every week, and will help the weeks move by a little bit faster, especially during January, which is infamous here for being a super long month that likes to drag its tail. So I'm really excited to have something to look forward to for a little bit, even if it's only 10 episodes, I believe, this season. I'm very excited for the rest of the show, and I'll see you all in the next video. Please like, share, and comment, and let me know what you think about my theories. Bye.